Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah. How's your day been?
Yeah, okay, it's day 2 of being back at work.
Yeah.
Um, God, it's hard.
Yeah. Oh, that sucks.
Just in that it's been back at a company where everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah.
Okay. Have you had any positive news from the other job yet?
So I have an interview with their CEO tomorrow.
Ah, fantastic.
Um,
Yeah.
And that should be the final round.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I really hope it goes well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that they make me an offer because
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I want out.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
How about you? How's your day?
Yeah, good. Just a day full of team meetings, really. But yeah, nothing to report special here.
Yeah.
What's been going on? Yeah, just messages with friends in the evening. Started watching Frozen 2. It's quite cute. The music's not very good. The story's going okay so far. I'm only about, half an hour, 45 minutes in. That's going all right. Yeah. They've just got, people who are watching and don't want spoilers, turn your ears off now. They've just got into the forest.
Oh, yes.
And they're being whipped around by the wind, and they've just met both teams who don't seem to have aged at all. Okay, that's where we're up to. So
great, thank you.
Open your ears now. It's fine. You can listen again. Yeah. They did seem, it was like a George Formby film though, just kind of bursting into song for no reason. Whereas the first film, they seem to have a reason for bursting into song. I don't know.
No, you should try living with this one. He bursts into song all the time.
Oh, that's really sweet. Yeah. Looks like you're about to say something. No. What's your top 20 then of the Nick's favourite sing songs? Well, top three.
Mine or Katie's?
Oh, okay. Yeah, tell me yours first, but then we'll hear Katie's as well.
I don't know. It just I don't really have any. It's just whatever happened to burst
whatever
in.
come. Okay.
Whatever earworm I have at the time.
No, there's often ones that you'll commonly sing because they relate to words that get said.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I was wondering if that was the. No, it's not.
No, it's not. Like you'll often start singing Gravity.
Really?
Yeah. If there's any mention of gravity, you'll start singing it.
As in Defying Gravity, that one,
No.
the wicked one.
No.
Oh no, Gravity. You know that one.
No, what's that?
Working against me.
No, I don't know that one.
Mayer. What's his name?
Oh, John Mayer.
John Mayer. Yeah.
I don't know this stuff.
Yeah, it's a common song to dance like fusiony blues to.
Oh, okay.
Or it was. It's not really anymore.
That's true.
Okay.
Used to be.
Defying Gravity is a cracking song, though.
Oh yeah, that is, yeah.
What's Katie's favourites then?
I unfortunately don't have the voice for that one.
It's a bit of a powerful one. That.
Katie's just as bad. She often bursts into song.
Oh.
Not that it's a bad thing.
Well covered. Oh. So we out in the garden this weekend making benchy things in the back.
No, we were. We were on holiday until.
Of course you were. Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Sunday, I think it was just
really wet.
Really wet.
So, okay.
Yeah, we just
had an inside day.
We had an inside day, and it was the last day of us, both not working. So we just
around.
Lazed.
Yeah, nice. Extra.
Okay.
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
I'm feeling totally outnumbered by Michaels here.
Jesus.
We're swarming.
Such an uncommon state of affairs. I was trying to work out the other day how many people there are with surname Moore in the dance community as well, because there seem to be a lot of people with the first name Michael, lots of Moores around.
Okay. Are there more Moores than Michael?
I suspect there are more Michaels than Moores. Damn, I should have done the Leandara's dance class before this. Too lazy. What have you been up to?
Not inspired to do dance classes at all when they're like remote.
You've got a real person though.
I do have a real person.
We don't dance together.
No.
Don't want you having this idyllic view of us dancing around all the time. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's what I'm imagining. I'm imagining kind of Mary Poppins style, dancing at every possible opportunity.
Maybe like half a song a month, something like
Oh,
You don't do the kitchen dance.
We kitchen dance from time to
that.
time.
We used to, but
oh,
we got used to each other too much.
oh dear. Oh. I had a nice weekend on Sunday. Met up with a friend, which was lovely. Had a nice little walk around a local park. Hey, Frankie.
Hi, beautiful.
Good hair, Frankie.
Sorry, my darling.
Good hair.
Good hair.
Good hair.
Thank you. I'm wearing it on the top of my head this season.
Good place for it.
Thank you so much. That's put me a bit off balance. Good hair yourself.
I like to throw a curveball every now and then, you know.
Oof, oof.
How's your day been, Frankie? What have you been up to?
My day's been lovely actually. Hold on,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the. So I've got my Storytime rig like.
Oh, is it
propped
mended itself?
over there.
Okay.
It's not sufficient to hold up the phone, so I've got the phone on a separate tripod, and the light is over there. But now the light is throwing shadow from the phone onto my. So sorry, this is all very boring. Admin. There we go.
Home studio.
Well, I bought a new rig today,
Fab.
and it's one of those. It's got like a kind of clip and then two long Watsits, and it's got a little light on one Watsit and a phone holder on the other. So hopefully that should be good enough. So I'm looking forward to that coming. But I did. Is Liz here? Is Liz here?
Nope.
Okay.
She might be on catch up.
What's up, my darling?
She might be on catch up.
I don't think she's catching up with this one. I think she's potentially just coming in for the after chats. Liz, if you're watching on catch up, look away for like a minute, okay? You're on your honour here. But I did a picture. I did a picture for Liz for her birthday.
Already? Oh my god.
Wow,
That's incredible.
that's awesome.
Frankie, that's gorgeous.
Wow.
I'm pretty pleased with it actually.
Yeah, it's
I
amazing.
thought I wasn't going to be able to. I thought I wasn't going to be able to do it because it's like a Facebook quality photo. When you like zoom in, you can't. A lot of the detail is kind of quite sort of blurry and it's quite sort of impressionistic and stuff. But I'm pretty happy with.
Yeah,
pretty happy
it's
with what
phenomenal.
came out.
Really good. Yes.
Happy about that.
And Ariane was super chuffed with her little shout out yesterday as well. So thank you.
Oh, bless her. Oh well, have another one.
Oh,
Hi,
hello,
Ariane.
Ariane.
Hi, Ariane. Thank you.
Yay.
Oh my God, she's here.
Yay!
Did she just arrive? Ariane.
Ariane, we were just talking about you.
We were literally just talking about you. Yeah,
We were just
We
talking
were-
about you.
in the middle of giving you a shout out. Would you still like it?
Yes, can I have a shout out?
Okay.
I'll just
Everybody-
be there in the corner.
Okay. Shout out to Ariane. Ariane, if you're watching this, we love you very much. This is a big hug, all for you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
I'm
That if you
here.
close your eyes and say Ariane 3 times, she appears.
It's true. I've been trying to work out how to summon her for years and years. Who knew?
good to see you, Libby. I like all your plants in the background as well.
Mhm.
Looks very cool.
Oh my goodness, that's
It's
lovely.
jungle now. It's very
Looks
jungly in
fantastic.
my flat. It's just
Wow, they're all
jungly.
over. Taking over.
Looks super cool.
I'm joining you this evening from the Four Seasons.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. All right for Sam.
Not that Four Seasons.
Who else have we got?
Can I show you the pastries I got today?
Yes.
Always
I
very
found
happy pastries.
That our restrictions were going to get worse as I was driving by a bakery and was, well, if I have 2 days to go get myself some really nice pastries from somewhere and not make it myself. I want to see this. Oh my goodness, what are they? One is a pear and almond tart and the other one's a pumpkin pie tart.
Wait, why can't I see them?
Oh, they're I'm using one thing for my voice and one thing for video. Hold on.
Oh God, that's
Yes, they're 2 M's.
Does this make it easier?
Yeah.
Oh,
Now, can you see it?
yes, thank you.
I can't hear you anymore though because I had my volume coming out of the other thing and didn't want to give you an echo.
nice. God, they look so good. Oh, Ivan, what have you got?
Almond macaroons.
Ooh, macaroons. How perfect. Hi, Bina.
Do you want to see what I've got?
Yeah.
I've got a mum.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah,
I've got a mum.
Il me voit ou il me voit pas?
Oui, ils sont là.
Bonjour.
You've
Ça
got.
va?
That's so exciting.
Qu'est-ce qu'elle dit qu'on se ressemble?
No, that's c'est excitant.
I can't see. Who was it?
Oh, who's that? Ivan, that might be you.
Who speak French?
Not me, sadly.
Trying to hold a conversation.
Pas moi, malheureusement.
Ah, bon.
My mum's been hearing your voice a lot, Frankie, while I was catching up. And once in a while, she'll pick a word that she knows and she'll just repeat it.
Oh.
T'as plus près de moi.
Je dis que de temps en temps, tu reconnais les mots.
Eh oui.
Papa.
Mais dis-lui qu'elle a une voix très agréable.
She says that your voice is very nice.
Oh, thank you very much. Merci.
Yes, very, very, very nice.
I agree.
J'aime beaucoup quand elle fait les différents personnages.
She likes to hear the different voices that you make.
We all do, Frankie.
Yes, yes, we do.
T'as vu tous les livres de couleur qu'elle avait
Derrière.
Tous les livres.
We lost Frankie.
Hey, Carmen.
Oh no.
Oh, there she is.
Just pretend I'm Katie for a second.
Hey, sweetie.
Regarde.
Okay. Hi, Katie. Katie, you look lovely. I like that beard that you have on.
It really suits you.
Need to get closer to the camera, Nick. Oh, Frankie, you've gone all robotic and frozen.
Yeah, it's gone really bad for me as well.
Am I back?
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're back.
You're back.
Oh, you're a bit jumpy.
You're gone. You're gone. You're
Frozen
back.
again.
You're gone. Yeah, I think red is trying to.
people who know things about Zoom, if I turn off Wi-Fi and use data, is that likely to be better?
Depends on your cell service.
Yeah, totally depends on your cell service versus your Wi-Fi.
What are you doing differently today that
Really
you
depends
usually
on
do?
your data. I'm on data and it's patchy.
Frankie,
Okay,
what are you doing differently today that you usually don't do?
I'm not doing anything differently.
Okay.
The only thing I can think is Hells might be using the internet. Hells might be watching, like, streaming a film or something. Hold on. Bear with me. I know, right? Bear with me. I'm going to go and switch to data and see if that is any better. Okay. Okay. Right. I'm very sorry about this disruption to ordinary service.
Oh.
Okay. Am I back?
Yes.
Am I back, and do I feel normal?
You are much smoother.
You are very normal.
You're never going to be normal, Frankie.
That's what I like to hear. Okay. Okay. If I go again, can I nominate Mike to unmute and be like, stop? Is that all right, Mike?
Yep.
Perfect. Maybe it is the new hair. It interferes with my Wi-Fi. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. We're very late. We're very late. God damn it.
But it's great because I've only just arrived. Yay!
Oh, Lisa!
I delayed enough for you, Lisa.
Were you stopping my internet? Have you been stopping my... Did you have your foot on my internet cable?
I love your chair, Lisa.
Thanks.
I didn't... Hold on. I'm very sorry, but I am...
I was being admonished. Sorry.
I am teaching you all. We can infuse over Lisa and her chair and her general beauty and amazingness afterwards. And we will. But for now, story time. Okay. So, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. I told you I would come again, the Djinni said to the dreaming Fadwa. Did you doubt me? In her dream, they stood together on the ridge near her family's camp, where she had first seen his palace. It was night-time and still warm. The ground was soft beneath her feet. She was wearing only a thin shift, but she felt no self-consciousness. No, she said, only it's been so long since I saw you last. Weeks and weeks. A long time for you, perhaps, he said. My kind can go years without seeing each other and think little of it. I thought perhaps you were displeased with me. Or... She paused and then burst out. I convinced myself you were just a dream. I started to think I was going mad. He smiled. I'm real enough, I assure you. Yes, but how can I be certain? You've already seen my palace once. He pointed down into the valley. If you were to ride in this direction and were lucky with your aim, you'd find a clearing swept clean of brush and rocks. That is where my palace is. Would I be able to see it again? No, it's invisible unless I choose otherwise. She sighed. You must live in a very different way if you think this is a reassurance. At that, he laughed. Surprising that a human girl could make him laugh. But she was still frowning, clearly unhappy. Perhaps he'd waited too long, as she said. There was still so much to learn about these brief human lives, their constant sense of urgency. He reached out, still not quite knowing how he did so. A blur of stars and desert, and then they were in his palace again, among the dark glass walls and embroidered cushions. This time, atop the cushions, a feast. Platters of rice and lamb and yogurt, flatbreads and cheese, and pitchers of crystalline water. Fadwa laughed, delighted. It's for you, he said, gesturing. Please, eat. And so she ate and chatted, telling him of small victories, a sick lamb nursed to health, the summer that was proving relatively mild. "There's even still water at the spring," she said. "My father says it's unusual for so late in the season." "Your father," the Djinni said. "Tell me more about him." "He's a good man," she said. "He takes care of us all. My uncles look up to him and all of my tribe respect him. We're among the smallest of the Hadid clans, but when we gather together, others will seek out his advice before bringing important matters before the sheikh. If his father had been the first son of my great-grandfather and not the third, then my father might be the sheikh himself." "Would your life have been very different then?" He was not quite following all this talk of tribes and clans and sheikhs, but the fondness in her voice and her eyes intrigued him. She smiled. "If my father was sheikh, then I would not exist. He would have been promised to a different woman from a more important clan than my mother's." "Promised?" "Betrothed. My father's father and my mother's father agreed on it when my mother was born." She saw his confusion and giggled. "Do Djinn not marry? Don't you have parents?" "Of course we have parents," he said. "We must come from somewhere. But betrothal, marriage, no, these things are unknown to us. We are much more free with our affections." Her eyes widened as she took this in. You mean with anyone?" He chuckled at her astonished face. "I prefer women, but yes, you have the sense of it." She coloured. "And with human women?" "None as of yet." She glanced away. "A Bedouin girl who did such things would be shunned." "A harsh punishment for acting on natural impulses," he said. This, he thought, was growing ever more intriguing. Not the human ideas, which were ridiculous, rigid, and unnecessary, but the push and pull of their conversation, the way he could elicit blushes from her with only the barest mention of a plain fact. "It's our way," she said. "How much harder would our lives be if we must worry about love affairs and jealousies? It's better this way, I think." "And you," he said, "are you also promised? Or will you choose your own mate?" She hesitated. She was, he sensed, uneasy on this subject. And then a sharp jolt, as though the ground beneath them had shuddered. Fadwa clutched at her cushion. What was that? It was the morning. He'd stayed too long. Someone was trying to wake her. Another shudder. He reached across and took up her hand, pressed it briefly to his lips. "Until next time," he said, and let her go. Someone was calling her name. She opened her eyes, but hadn't they been already open? And there was her mother leaning above her. "Girl, what is wrong with you? Are you sick? I had to shake you and shake you." Fadwa shivered. For a moment, her mother's face had turned sepulchral, the eyes like dark hollows. A hot breeze billowed the inside of the tent. A sudden noise from outside, the goats braying in their pen. Her mother glanced around, and when she turned back, Fadwa saw only her usual face, consternation written in its deep, sun-carved lines. "Now, girl, get up. The goats need milking. Just listen to them." Fadwa sat up and rubbed her face, half expecting to wake again in the glass palace, as though that had been reality and this now the dream. All morning, as she worked, she would close her eyes and imagine herself there again, feeling the trail of his lips on her hand and the glow that had answered it low in her stomach. Chapter 15. The Golem stood on a hillside in a Brooklyn cemetery, next to a plot of recently turned earth. Above the plot sat a headstone with Elsa Meyer's name and dates engraved on one side. The other was still blank, as though it hadn't yet heard the awful news. Michael Levy had brought her to the cemetery, and he stood behind her now, lost in sadness and guilt. He'd come to see her at the bakery a few days earlier at closing time and apologised for not visiting before. "I was at Swinburne," he said. "A case of the flu." She knew it was the truth, but to the Golem's eye, Michael was healthier than she'd ever seen him. There was a pink tinge to his cheeks, and the dark circles under his eyes had faded. The eyes themselves, though, were still heavy and sad, and too old for his face. His uncle's eyes. He said, "I just wanted to see if there was anything you needed. I don't know if my uncle was helping you with money, but I know a few people at the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society." "Thank you, Michael, but that's quite all right," she said. "I have all I need." "I suppose your needs are the same as mine," he said with an awkward smile. "A little food, a little sleep, and then back to work." Her own smile faltered a bit, but he didn't notice and pressed on. "I'm going to visit my uncle's grave tomorrow. I don't know if you keep the Sabbath, but I thought if you wanted to come." His nervous hopefulness was making her uncomfortable, but this was something she dearly wanted. "Yes," she said. "I'd be grateful." They arranged to meet at her boarding house at 10 in the morning. The bell over the door rattled as he left, jarring in the now quiet shop. She found she was relieved that he had gone. If only things could be different between them. It would be good to have a friend to talk to, someone who'd known the rabbi. But his attraction to her complicated matters, not the least because she saw, perhaps better than he did, how it had grown tangled with guilt and remorse. Instead of a fleeting infatuation, she was becoming a dark fascination. She would have to say something to him, kindly if possible. Anna had been lingering in the back, pretending to fuss with her bootlaces. Now she smiled slyly as the Golem retrieved her cloak. "Don't look at me like that," the Golem muttered. "He's a friend, nothing more." "Don't you want him to be more?" "No, I don't." She paused, forcing her hands to relax. She'd been in danger of ripping the clasp from her cloak. "I don't feel that way, but he does, for me." She turned to Anna, plaintive. "Why can't we just be friendly? Why do there have to be complications?" "It's the way of the world," Anna said, shrugging. "It's a nuisance," said the Golem. "Don't I know it? The boys I've had to turn away. But Chava, you can't just spend the rest of your life alone either. It just isn't natural." "Would it be better to lie to Michael and say things I don't feel?" "Of course not. But feelings need time to grow. And I hate to think of you in that boarding house with all those dusty bachelors mending the holes in their drawers." "I don't mend their drawers, Anna." The girl burst into giggles. After a moment, the Golem smiled as well. She was still uncertain what to make of Anna, with her tempestuous romances and flights of fancy, but the young woman was becoming a surprising source of comfort. The next morning, Michael Levy arrived at the boarding house exactly on time. They took a streetcar to Park Row and then boarded the train to Brooklyn. Nervous among the crush of passengers, she said, "I've never been across the bridge before." "Don't worry," he smiled. "It's not quite as dangerous as crossing the ocean." With a series of jolts, the train pulled out of its shed and up the ramp. She watched as they rose, passing delivery wagons and men plodding along on foot. Rooftop chimneys belched soot and steam to either side, and then fell away as they reached the bridge. She'd hoped to see the water, but the train was caged on the inner track behind a stuttering fence of poles and girders. Seen through the fence, the horses and carts on the outer roadway seemed to move with a broken, palsied gait. The train shuddered to a halt in the Brooklyn shed. With little conversation, Michael led them off the train and onto a succession of streetcars. And then, finally, they were walking up a long drive towards a pair of large, ornate gates. The world seemed to go quiet as they passed through. The drive narrowed to a curving path and then opened to a calm vista of snow-topped hills covered with rows of stones. "It's lovely here," she said, surprised. They passed tall monuments and ivy-hung mausoleums and pillared busts of solemn men. At last Michael led her down a row, and there it was, the rectangular mound of white dusted earth and the stone with its half-blank face. She stood at the foot of the grave, wondering what to do. Was Michael expecting her to show her grief? To cry? Michael cleared his throat. "I'll give you a moment." "Thank you," she said, grateful. He wandered down the path out of sight, and she was alone with the rabbi. "I miss you," she murmured. She crouched down next to the grave and tried to imagine him there beneath the ground. It seemed impossible when all her senses told her he had disappeared from the world. She cast about for what to tell him. "Everyone at the bakery is well," she said. "Anna has a new suitor and seems happy, though I know you wouldn't approve. I've started taking in mending to have something to do at night. The nights are still the hardest. But I went walking this week, at night, with a man. He has to hide himself like me. I'm seeing him again next week. I'm sorry, Rabbi. I know I shouldn't. But I think it will help to walk with him." She trailed a hand along the snow, half expecting some sort of sign, a trembling in the ground, a sense of recrimination. But none came. All lay silent. After a few minutes, Michael reappeared on the path and came to stand by her side. "I should give you time," she said, and turned to leave. But he put a hand on her arm. "Please stay," he said. "I don't like being alone in cemeteries." And it was true. A low, formless dread and unease was growing in him. "Of course," she said, and stood close by his side. "He was a wonderful man," Michael said, and then he began to cry. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his face. "I should have done something to prevent this." "You can't blame yourself," she protested. "But if I hadn't been so stubborn, if he hadn't—" "Then you would have been different people," the golem said, hoping that it was the right thing to say. "And he thought very highly of you. He called you a good man." "He did?" "Why does that surprise you when you help so many?" "I turned my back on religion. How could he not feel I'd turned my back on him?" "I think he understood, in his way," she said hesitantly. She wasn't certain if it was the truth, but Michael seemed comforted, and that, she was sure, was what the rabbi would have wanted. Michael sighed and wiped his face. Together they stared at the headstone. "I'll have to have the engraving done," he said. "Later this year." He glanced at her. "I don't usually pray, but if you'd like—" "It's all right," the golem said. "I prayed already, on my own." Streetcars and trains and more streetcars again, and they were back in the Lower East Side. The sun was low in the sky. A thin snow blew down the alleyways. "Let me take you to a cafe," Michael said, and then added, "If you have the time, of course. I don't mean to monopolise your day." She'd been looking forward to going home. The streetcars had been far too crowded with bodies and their stray desires. But she could come up with no ready excuse, and his hopefulness was tugging at her. "All right," she said, "if you like." They went to a place he knew, a dark cafe filled with young men who all seemed to be arguing with each other. He ordered coffee and almond-speckled biscuits, and they sat together, listening to the debates that raged around them. "I'd forgotten how loud it is in here," he said, apologetic. The voices were in her mind as well, asking for abstract things. Peace, rights, freedom. "They all sound very angry," she said. "Oh, absolutely. Each of them has a different theory about what's wrong with the world." She smiled. "Do you have a theory too?" "I used to," he said. He sat thinking for a moment and then said, "I see hundreds of men every week at the sheltering house. They all need the same things: a place to stay, a job, English lessons. But some will be happy with whatever comes their way, and others won't be satisfied with anything. And there's always a few who are only looking to take advantage. So when my friends talk about how best to fix the world, it all sounds so naive. As though there could be one solution that would solve every man's problems, turn us into innocents in the Garden of Eden, when in truth we will always have our lesser natures." He looked up at her. "What do you think?" "Me?" she said, startled. "Do you think we're all good at heart? Or we can only be both good and bad?" "I don't know," she said, trying not to fidget under his scrutiny. "But I think sometimes men want what they don't have because they don't have it. Even if everyone offered to share, they would only want the share that wasn't theirs." He nodded. "Exactly. And I can't see that changing. Human nature is the same, no matter the system." Then he chuckled. "I'm sorry. I didn't bring you here to argue politics. Let's talk about something else." "What should we talk about?" "Tell me about yourself. I really know very little about you." Her spirits sank. She'd have to choose her words very carefully. She'd have to lie and remember the lies for later. "I was married," she said uncertainly. "Oh, yes." Michael's face fell. "That I did know. You must miss him." She could say, "Yes, I loved him very much," and avoid all further inquiry. But didn't Michael deserve some measure of the truth? "I do, sometimes," she said. "But to be honest, we didn't know each other very well." "Was it an arranged marriage?" "I suppose, in a sense." "And your parents gave you no choice?" "I had no parents," she said flatly. "And he was a wealthy man. He bought what he wanted." That much at least was true. She remembered Rotfeld's pride at what his money had paid for, his perfect wife in her wooden box. "No wonder my uncle wanted to help you," Michael said. "I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine how lonely that must have been." "It's all right." Already she felt guilty. What stories was he creating in his mind to fill in the details? Time to turn the conversation back to him if she could. "And any life must seem lonely compared to yours. You're surrounded by hundreds of men every day." He laughed. "True enough. Though I don't get to know them very well, since they're only at the house for 5 days. Although there's one man who's been with us for a few weeks now, ever since I got sick. He's helping to keep the place together." He smiled. "I couldn't believe my luck. I came back expecting to find the place in ruins, and here was this kind old man running things and keeping order. He's got my staff practically eating out of his hand. I've insisted on paying him a little, although it's nothing close to what he deserves." "It sounds like you're lucky to have found him," said the golem. He nodded. "You should meet him sometime. He reminds me of my uncle in a way. I think he used to be a rabbi. He just has that air about him. Like he knows more than he's saying. It was growing late. Men were slowly drifting from the cafe, leaving each argument in its usual stalemate. Outside, a lamplighter boy walked by, pole slung over his thin shoulder like a bayonet. "I should be going home," the golem said. She had a sudden dread of the walk back with him. "Of course," he said. "Let me take you." "I don't want you to go out of your way." "No, I insist." As they approached her boarding house, the golem grew conscious of how much they looked like a couple out strolling in the twilight. Michael, she saw, was beginning to gather courage to ask her if she would see him again. If they could perhaps have dinner sometime. "I can't," she said, and stopped walking, her hand pulling away from his arm. Surprised, he stopped too. "What's wrong?" he asked. The words tumbled from her mouth. "I'm sorry, Michael. I know you're interested in me." He paled, then attempted a wry smile. "Was it that obvious?" "You're a very good person," she said, miserable. "But I can't. I just can't." "Of course," he said. "Too soon. Of course. I'm sorry. If I gave you any distress..." No, please don't apologize." Frustration rose up in her chest. "I want us to be friends, Michael. Can't we simply be friends? Isn't that all right?" Instantly, she was certain it had been the wrong thing to say. "Of course," he said. "Yes, of course. That's the important thing after all. Friendship." No longer trusting herself to speak, she could do nothing but nod. "Good." His voice was hollow. "That's settled then." He replaced her hand on his arm, as if to show that nothing had changed, and they walked the last block to her home as the most perfectly matched couple on the street, as with each step they both desperately wished to be elsewhere. It was long past midnight, and the full moon was sinking towards the East River, threading between bridge cables and water tanks to shine into the windows of the sheltering house. It crept across the drab wool of the cot blankets and into the open eyes of Yehuda Shalman, who'd been waiting for exactly this. He needed the moonlight to write by. So far, things were progressing better than Shalman had dared hope. He'd thought the director's return would be a hurdle, that he'd have to charm the man or addle his mind, but it seemed Levy was even more of a pushover than his staff. Shalman had protested the offered stipend at first, but then accepted, as he must. No one was that altruistic, not even the man he was pretending to be. He'd solidified his position and gained their trust. It was time to put the next part of his plan into action. His dream had promised him that New York held a secret to life eternal, but he needed a way to narrow his search, a dowsing rod to point him in the right direction. And what better way than to turn himself into that very dowsing rod? He reached under his cot and found the tattered sheaf of burned papers. He sorted through them in the moonlight, setting aside the ones that held some bearing on his purpose. Taking up a fresh sheet of paper and pencil, he began to scribble notes. If he combined this incantation with this name of God... He wrote formulas and scratched them out, drew diagrams of branching trees whose leaves were the letters of the alphabet. He worked for hours until finally, near dawn, he experienced a rush of clarity as the diagrams and formulas and incantations all melted into one. His pencil danced ecstatic across the page. Finally, his hand stilled, and he looked at what he had written, feeling in his bones that he'd succeeded. The old familiar pang passed through him. What he could have been, given the chance. Oh, what he might have accomplished. He glanced around once more, but his neighbours were all asleep. Taking a deep breath, he began to quietly read aloud what he had written. A long, unbroken string of syllables issued from Charman's mouth. Some were soft and languid as a lazy stream. Others were harsh and jagged, and Charman spat these from between his teeth. If one of the old sages had been listening, one schooled not only in Hebrew and Aramaic, but also in centuries of mystical lore, even he would have been hard-pressed to make sense of it. He might have recognized snatches here and there, portions of various prayers, names of God that had been woven together letter by letter. But the rest would have been a terrifying mystery. He gathered momentum as he reached the apex of the formula, the letter in the very middle, an aleph, the silent sound that was the beginning of all creation. And then, as if that aleph were a mirror, the formula reversed itself, and letter by letter, Charman tumbled down the other side. He was nearing the end. He was almost upon it. Bracing himself, he spoke the final sound, and then suddenly all of creation was pouring through him. He was infinite. He was the universe. There was nothing that he did not encompass. But then he looked upward and beheld that he was nothing, a mite, an insignificant speck cowering beneath the unblinking gaze of the One. It lasted forever. It was only a moment. Waking to himself, Charman blinked back tears and drew a clammy hand across his brow. It was always this way when he tried something new and powerful. The moon sank below the window, leaving only the yellow glow of the gaslights. Charman had hoped to test the efficacy of his formula immediately, to see if indeed he had turned himself into that dowsing rod. But exhaustion overcame him, and he fell into a dreamless sleep until morning, waking only when the noise of the dormitory grew too loud to ignore. Men were dressing themselves for the day, straightening their mussed blankets with the nervous courtesy of house guests. Some prayed next to their beds. Phylacteries? Am I saying that? Phylacteries? Phylacteries strapped to their foreheads and wound about their arms. This is why I should prep first. A line for the water closet stretched down the hallway, each man blearily clutching his soap and towel. Charman dressed and donned his coat. He was ravenously hungry. Downstairs, he discovered the cook had left him a few slices of bread and marmalade for breakfast. He devoured them without pause. Resisting the urge to lick the marmalade from his fingers, the habits of a life spent alone were still with him. He walked past the parlour and out the front door of the sheltering house. It was time to see what he'd accomplished. 5 hours later, he returned to the sheltering house, dejected and angry. He'd walked the length and breadth of the Lower East Side, past all the rabbis, scholars, synagogues, and storefront yeshivas he could find, and yet there had been no sign from the dowsing spell. No pull down a particular street, no sense that perhaps he should go into this doorway or talk to that man over there. But his formula had worked, he was certain of it. Once again, he counselled himself to be patient. There were still private libraries, the giant yeshiva he'd learned about on the Upper West Side, not to mention the conclave of urbane German Jews to the north. Not as schooled in esoteric wonders as their Russian and Polish cousins, but still, he might uncover something. He would not give up. But he was nervous. He'd passed a funeral procession on Delancey, some distinguished personage, judging by the crowd of mourners and their weighty silence. Most likely a respected and prominent rabbi, dead after a long and peaceful dotage, certain of his place in the world to come. Charman had stood to one side and looked away, repressed a childish urge to hide lest the angel of death spy him there, hidden away among the Jews of New York. Back at the sheltering house, he paused at the director's door. Levy was sitting at his desk, pen uncharacteristically still. His eyes were vacant. Sharman frowned. Had someone charmed or altered him? Was there another force at work here? He tapped once on the door. Michael? The man gave a guilty start. Joseph, hello. Sorry, have you been there long? Not long, no, Sharman said. Are you all right? Not sick again, I hope? No. Well, not exactly. He smiled faintly. Matters of the heart. Ah, said Sharman, his interest evaporating. But now the director was looking at him speculatively. Can I ask you a personal question? Sharman sighed inwardly. Certainly. Were you ever married? No, I never had that blessing. Ever been in love? Of course, Sharman lied. What man hasn't by my age? But it didn't work out. It wasn't quite a question. It was a long time ago. I was a different man then. What happened? She left. She was there and then she was gone. I never knew why. The words had simply come to him. He'd said them without thinking. Levy was nodding in unwanted sympathy. Did you wonder afterward what you might have done differently? Every day of my life since, I wonder. He shrugged. Perhaps I was too difficult a man to love. Oh, I have a hard time believing that. Enough, he thought. Is there anything else you need? Otherwise I'll see how the cook is getting on with dinner. Levy blinked. Oh, of course. Thanks, Joseph, for letting me bend your ear. Sharman smiled in reply and removed himself from the doorway. Chapter 16. You wore a hat, the golem said. Thank you. They were walking north, away from her boarding house, in a thin sleet fine as frozen mist. It was the third trip they'd taken together since the night in Madison Square Park. 2 weeks before, they'd visited the grounds at Battery Park, skipping the aquarium as she'd insisted he not melt the lock again, and then curved north along West Street to the Barrow Street Pier. In summer, the pier was a bustling recreation centre and promenade, but now it was barren, its guardrails dressed with icicles. Wary of the slick wood, the Djinni had stayed near the boarded-over refreshment windows at the landing and watched as the golem went out to the end of the pier, her cloak fluttering in the harbour wind. It's quiet out there, she'd said when she came back. They'd walked a bit farther along West Street, but the views of water and distant lights turned quickly to cargo warehouses and steamship offices. They were about to turn around when he saw a glow in the sky a few piers away and dragged her over to investigate. The crew of a freighter, desperate to make the morning tides, had rigged the deck with electric lights and was working through the night. Stevedores raced about, hauling cargo, their breath blowing in white gusts. The Djinni and the golem watched until a crew boss yelled at them in Norwegian to clear out. They had no time for rubberneckers. The golem, not thinking, apologised in the same language, and they hastily retreated before the boss could corner his presumed countrymen and ask what town they hailed from. The week after that, they'd walked north through the Lower East Side into a melange of Jewish and Bohemian shops, interspersed here and there with faded German signs, the remains of Kleindeutschland adrift in an Eastern European area. The golem had been in a poor mood that week, distracted and unhappy. She'd said little of why, only that she'd gone to a cemetery in Brooklyn with an acquaintance, a man named Michael. The Djinni got the impression that this Michael desired more from their relationship than she did. I pity whoever tries to court you, he'd said. You'd have them at a serious disadvantage. I don't want to be courted, she muttered. By anyone, or just him? She'd shaken her head as if to dismiss the question itself. She was hard to comprehend, this woman. She had a prudish streak that seemed of a piece with her caution and serious-mindedness. She was as curious as he, but hesitated to explore. She smiled occasionally, but rarely laughed. In all, her character was completely opposed to what he usually looked for in a woman of his company. She would make a terrible Djinni. They'd cut north and west, heading deeper into the sleeping neighbourhoods. What's it like, he'd asked her, to feel all those desires and fears? Like many small hands grabbing at me. He'd almost squirmed, imagining it. Perhaps he himself would make a terrible golem. I'm getting better at not responding to them, she'd said, but it's still difficult, especially when I'm the object of the fear or desire. Like your friend Michael's. She'd said nothing, her face a studied blank. Perhaps she worried that he would develop desires for her. But he hadn't, not even mildly, which was surprising. He'd rarely been so long in a woman's company for any other reason. He liked her well enough, he supposed. It amused him to show her around, to see now familiar places through her new eyes. She noticed different details than he did. He took in a landscape all at once before devoting his attention to its elements, while she examined each thing in its turn, building to the whole picture. She could walk faster than he, but she was usually the one lagging behind, enthralled by something in a shop window or a gaily painted sign. And at least she no longer seemed frightened of him. When he'd arrived at her boarding house for their fourth journey, he'd had only seconds to wait before she joined him. And she'd stopped trying to hide conspicuously at his side, though she wore her hood up until they were a ways from her home. They continued on a zigzagging northwest path in their now customary near silence. Already he regretted his promise about the hat. The sleet was no danger, barely an irritation. In fact, the hat itself was worse than the sleet. He'd bought it from a pushcart without trying it on, a mistake he wouldn't make again. The fabric was cheap and rough, and the brim made him feel like a horse with blinders on. Stop fidgeting, muttered the golem. I can't stand this thing, he said. It feels like I've got something on my head. She snorted, almost a laugh. Well, you do. You're the one who made me wear it, and it itches. Finally, she pulled the hat from his head. From her sleeve, she took a handkerchief, unfolded it, and placed it inside the hat. She put the hat back on top of his head and tucked the corners of the kerchief beneath the brim. There, she said. Is that better? Yes, he said, startled. Good, she said grimly. Now perhaps I can concentrate on where I'm going. I thought you couldn't hear my mind. I didn't need to. You were fussing enough for the whole street to know it. They walked on. The temperature had dropped, turning the sleet to snow. The long choked gutters made each street corner a dark pool. They were forced to step around these until at one corner the Djinni, after checking that there was no one else on the street, took a running leap, bounding to the other side of the black water. It was a fair distance. Few human men could have done it. He grinned, pleased with himself. The golem stood on the corner behind him, frowning. He waited, impatient, while she picked her way across. What if someone had seen, she said. The risk was worth it. To gain what? A few moments' time? A reminder that I'm still alive. To this she did not reply, only shook her head. In silence, he took them to Washington Square Park. He'd looked forward to showing her the glowing arch, but the weather had forced the city to shut off the lights or risk them shorting. The arch loomed in shadow above them, its lines stark and precise against the clouds. "It should be lit," he said, disappointed. "No, I like it this way." They walked beneath, and he marvelled anew at its height, its sheer size. So many larger buildings in this city, and yet it was the arch that fascinated him. In the dark, the enormous marble carvings seemed to change and ripple like waves. "It serves no purpose," he said, trying to explain his fascination, to herself as much as him, to himself as much as her. "Buildings and bridges are useful, but why this? A giant arch from nowhere to nowhere." "What does it say up there?" She was on the other side, peering up at the shadowed inscription. He quoted from memory, "Let us raise a standard to which the wise and the honest can repair. The event is in the hand of God," said by someone named Washington. "I thought Washington was a place," she said, dubious. "Never mind that. What does it mean?" She didn't answer, only continued gazing at the letters she couldn't see. Then she asked, "Do you believe in God?" "No," he said, unhesitating. "God is a human invention. My kind have no such belief, and nothing I've experienced suggests there's an all-powerful ghost in the sky answering wishes." He smiled, warming to the subject. "Long ago, during the reign of Suleiman, the most powerful of the Djinn could grant wishes. There are stories from that time of Djinn captured by human wizards. A Djinni would offer his captor 3 wishes in exchange for his release. The wizard would spend his wishes on more wishes and force the Djinni into perpetual slavery, until finally the wizard would wish for something poorly worded which would allow his captive to trap him, and then the Djinni would be freed." She was still studying the arch, but she was listening. "So perhaps this god of the humans is just a Djinni like myself, stuck in the heavens, forced to answer wishes. Or maybe he freed himself long ago, only no one told them." Silence. "What do you think?" he pressed. "Do you believe in their God?" "I don't know," she said. "The rabbi did, and he was the wisest person I've ever met. So, yes, maybe I do." "A man tells you to believe, and you believe." "It depends on the man. Besides, you believe the stories that you were told. Have you ever met a Djinni who could grant wishes?" "No, but that ability has all but disappeared." "So it's just stories now. And perhaps the humans did create their god, but does that make him less real? Take this arch. They created it. Now it exists." "Yes, but it doesn't grant wishes," he said. "It doesn't do anything." "True," she said. "But I look at it and I feel a certain way. Maybe that's its purpose." He wanted to ask, what good was a god that only existed to make you feel a certain way? But he left off. Already they were treading the edge of an argument. They left the arch and walked farther into the park. Sleigh tracks carved long arcs along the ground, around the islands of snow-covered lawn. The oval fountain, shut off for the season, was a shallow bowl of ice. Sleeping men dotted the benches here and there, barely visible under their layers of blankets. The golem glanced at them and then quickly away, a sorrowful look on her face. "They need so much," she murmured, "and I just walk by." "Yes, but what would you do? Feed them all? Take them home with you? You aren't responsible for them." "Easy to say when you can't hear them." "It's still true. You're generous to a fault, Hava. I think you'd give your own self away if only someone wished for it. She hugged herself, clearly unhappy. The wind had pushed the hood back from her face. Snowflakes clung unmelting to her cheeks and the sides of her nose. She looked like a living statue, her features white and glittering. He reached out and brushed away the snow from her cheek. The crystals disappeared at once under his hand. She startled, surprised, then realized the problem. Ruefully, she wiped a gloved hand across her face. He said, if you were to lie down on one of those benches, you would be buried under snow and pigeons by morning. She laughed at the image. It was gratifying to hear that rare laugh. He felt as though he'd earned it. As they neared the far end of the park, they heard a distant jingling behind them. A sleigh carriage was entering from beneath the arch, the hitched pair trotting handsomely. The reins were held not by a coachman, but by one of the passengers, a man in evening dress and silk hat. A blonde woman in a fashionable cloak sat next to him, laughing as he took the sleigh in a tight figure 8 beside the fountain. The sleigh leaned threateningly to one side, and the woman buried her face in her muffler and shrieked, obviously enjoying herself. The golem smiled, watching them. The Djinni stepped back onto the grass as the sleigh neared, mindful of the horses. The couple in the sleigh saw them, and the man raised his hand in a jaunty salute. It was clear they were glad for the audience, glad that someone would see them as they wanted to be seen. Young and daring, thrilled to be alive and playing at love. The team, obviously well trained, joggled only once as they passed the Djinni. For a moment, the two couples were gazing at each other as though in a mirror. And then the Djinni saw the beginning of something startled, even frightened in the woman's eyes. The same budding uncertainty rose in the man's face. His hand tightened on the reins. And then they flew by, the horses drawing them away from their own eldritch reflection, the too handsome man and the strangely glittering woman. The golem's smile was gone.
Well,
What?
Oh my goodness.
no, we can stop there.
What happened?
Oh, Carmen's face.
Oh,
Spooky eldritch weirdness. You can't be normal. Everyone knows. Poor Golem and Djinni.
oh.
Oh. How are we all feeling about Michael?
Oh.
Oh, Lisa!
I expected that.
Yeah. I quite like it. I like that that it's not just like, oh, she's gonna, like just respond to his desires or whatever. I like that she was able to kind of say, like,
Yeah,
no.
I was quite surprised of that as well, because she's kind of been the emotional labor champion so far, just doing everything that is expected of her. But he didn't even have to ask, and she was like, no.
I guess it's quite efficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, are we allowed to make suppositions, or is that going through the dangerous realm of maybe spoiler? Because I don't know.
Absolutely, go for it. I will sit here blank faced like a statue.
I was just wondering. I don't know if like that's in everybody's mind as well, but Wait, sorry, I fell asleep midway, so I'm a bit confused now. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wonder if the Bedouin girl that is having a weird dream relationship with the genie has anything to do with the Bedouin girl that the ice cream maker helped, who was possessed, who he went, because she was a Bedouin girl, and he went to help, and suddenly her curse was on him, and who can he see? The genie. And I'm just like, are they linked? Did they, because it's a big bunch of people all linked with each other ending up in New York, and I'm like, is he linked with them as well? Anyway,
Maybe in some way, but I was thinking that maybe because of the time it doesn't match, because the genie was trapped, the ice cream maker, this happened like during his lifetime, and he's like, what, in his 60s? And this girl was like, he met her hundreds of years ago before he was trapped.
True. That's true.
But she clearly was.
But I did
possessed
have a
by
suspicion
Djinni.
maybe if the girl had something to do with the genie getting trapped. The
Yeah,
girl
oh, for
that-
sure.
Yeah,
For
that's what I was thinking.
Maybe a relative of
a very nice, innocent girl.
No, maybe her parents got worried when she started, not waking up,
Sleeping out, yeah.
and kind of thought she was possessed or something. So
I could see
I
that.
don't know.
Maybe it wasn't her directly, but something related to her. How the genie got trapped in the. Yeah, maybe.
Who knows?
Well, you do.
I mean, you do, yeah.
I'd like a couple of other people also know.
The author probably knows.
Author probably knows. Hi, Malcolm. Came out garbled. Hi, Malcolm, is how a normal person would say it.
I think I recognized the waving and the lip moving. People were still talking about the story, and I didn't want to stop them doing that, but I did mute them because I am quite far behind. I began my catch-up, legend today, so maybe in a day or two.
Join us. We should say goodbye to the catch-up crew. Did somebody just say ooh? Or was
Me,
that...
I did. Gordon sends hugs to everyone, and is also hoping to join us tomorrow. He's also playing catch up.
How exciting! Well, I know that he is reading along as opposed to catching up videos, but let's send him some love anyway. He'll probably never see it, but we should send it. And
Secret love.
Secret love. Gordon. Gordon, are you listening? Love you. Does anybody have any secrets of their love that they want to tell Gordon? Because he probably won't ever watch this or listen to them. So if anyone wants to say how much they love him.
Tell Gordon all the secrets of my love for him, because he's a really lovely person to tell secrets of love. That's the best way.
How about this? How about this for a plan? What would people think about this? After this tonight, after the recording ends and after the after chat, all of us, or all of us who love Gordon, this is not like a mandate, but if you love Gordon, send him a message telling him that you love him. I really like the idea of him just like being at home randomly and just suddenly being overwhelmed by a slew of messages from all different people saying that they love him. How about that?
Perfect.
We have a plan. We have a plan. Also, if anyone is watching this on catch up, and you're not now, but you're now. We're in your past and you're in your present. Why don't you send Gordon a message telling him you love him? Yeah, this is the gift that keeps on giving. Okay, cool.
It's
Right.
quite meta because I might end up listening to this again. So maybe I'll need to send Gordon 2 messages.
Do you have a message for your future self, Malcolm?
I was just laughing because I was immediately thinking everything's going to be okay, but then you know how I feel about that, and it's
that is true.
You know.
Would you like me to tell you a specially tailored Malcolm suitable version?
Yeah, please. That would be nice.
Okay. Nobody else listen. Because this is a lie, but I have to tell it to him in this form so that he will accept it. Okay, Malcolm, I speak now only to you. This is the real truth. The other thing is the lie. Don't tell the other. Malcolm, some things are going to be okay.
Thank you.
There we go.
I like.
Okay, right. Shall we say goodbye to the catch-up crew now?
Yeah.
Okay, catch-up crew. We love you.
Bye, Malcolm.
Good night. Goodbye. Hi, Malcolm. Bye, Malcolm.
Malcolm.
Bye.